Hi all, this is Chaz again. Welcome to the fourth episode of Paradiso Zoneworks, a podcast devoted to the occult and esoteric arts. Today, I want to talk about the occult and the experience of nothingness. As I have discussed in previous podcasts, for me, practicing the occult is about finding and exploring avenues of possibility for spiritual growth as I come into contact with and manifest occult realities. In practicing the occult in its various forms, we operationalize what the Christian prophet Jesus meant when he said that with the Transcendent, all things are possible. All things are possible for us when we tap into the great spiritual power bestowed upon us by the radiant and most holy one. Following Neoplatonic, Existentialist, and Kabbalistic traditions, I will talk through in the following few minutes the notion inducing ourselves a state of nothingness is a powerful way to manifest and make ourselves ready to experience our occult potential. I will also show that experiencing a state of nothingness is fundamental for enacting magic and mystical rites. The experience of nothingness opens us up to our oneness with the interconnectedness of all things, animate and inanimate. From a state of emptiness, the awareness of our nothingness, we can bring into being those realities that lie hidden behind the curtain of the mundane. I ended the last episode with a quote from Kabbalah and Hasidism historian Moshe Idel, describing the self-induced feeling of nothingness that a magus mystic must experience before ascending to worlds beyond those we access through our senses. Idel writes, the quintessence of the mystical magical model in Hasidism can be defined as the sequence of an inner mystical experience that consists of a cleaving to God, often preceded by a self-induced feeling of nothingness. That is an expansion of consciousness, and the subsequent return to this world and drawing down into it the divine energy by performing the ritual and then distributing that energy to others. The two main phases of this model are induced actively by the mystic. Inducing the state of nothingness in ourselves brings about an expansion of consciousness. Expansion of consciousness always sounds like a good thing. What that means in reality, though, isn't always so apparent. You might be familiar with the term in relationship to hallucinogenics. Is this what Idel means? I don't think so. But as I describe the state of nothingness below, what Idel means will become clearer. For now, it's sufficient to say that expansion of consciousness means the intrusion of the transcendent reality into our personal lives. But what is nothingness that it can do this? And once I figure that out, how can I induce this state, as Idel says the Hasidic mystic Magus does? To help understand what nothingness is, I'll look at what nothing and nothingness mean in everyday life. From this starting point in the everyday, I will then explore the uses made of the concept and experience of nothingness in occult, mystical, and magical practice. To speak of nothing in everyday life is to describe the lack of something, emptiness, non-existence, loss, death. I have a pet in my arms means I have something in my arms. I have nothing in my hands means my hands are empty. I have nothing as opposed to something, either animate or inanimate. Nothing is there means that where something could or should be, nothing is. Where trees should be, now there's nothing, a waste or barren spot of earth. The place where trees once stood now stands empty. Nothing can refer to actions and processes. I do nothing, I own nothing, I move nothing. To say I have nothing or do nothing means the opposite of having or doing something. In our social and personal lives, most people know it's best to have something of whatever humans value rather than nothing. To say that I have nothing, no wealth, no social life, no things, means I am poor. I lack those things that society believes a person needs to have to be something. Having or being something means being someone, not no one. People flee from nothing. They fear and are willing to die or kill to have something and not nothing. To be deprived of things that society considers signs of success or well-being will stigmatize us. Dalits in India are born with nothing and have little chance of having anything. They are non-persons, despised and hated. The indigent or have-nothings in any society live at the edges of social life. Nothing implies emptiness, and emptiness is closely associated with loss. The state of complete loss is death. So in many ways, nothing aligns with death and the sorrow, fear, and despair that death brings with it. People with nothing are close to being dead in the eyes of society. They occupy a liminal space that people who are vibrant with life shun. What I've just said syncs closely with the word nothing's etymological meaning: insignificant thing, thing of no consequence. No one wants to be considered nothing. Believing that one's life is thought to be nothing by another human can emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually devastate us. In its everyday meaning, the word nothing can relate to whether we have things or not. In that sense, nothing is about being empty or full. In modern secular society, it is always best for you to have or be something, to believe something, to make something as opposed to having, being, believing, or making nothing. Nothing is an emptiness in a world that rewards fullness. Humans desire plenitude over scarcity. This reflects the socio-biological backdrop of our everyday thoughts and actions. Evolution rewarded those who could provide for themselves and their social group. In a capitalist society, having or being nothing can incur terrifying stigmas. I've drawn at least a very crude sketch of how we use the concept of nothing to understand ourselves and our place in the world. With this sketch in mind, we can begin asking what nothingness is. What is this state that the Kabbalist induces to prepare themselves to ascend to the infinite? Is nothing the state of having nothing or being nothing? When we hear the word nothingness, it can evoke imagery of wastelands and people desolated by unseen horrors and terrifying rapaciousness of the soul. Nothingness can symbolize a place where all the evil and negative things in the world find their home. These are the terrifying things that lurk at the edges of life and haunt the world of living beings. To many, death is nothingness. In many ways, nothingness is like the condition of the Dalit in India, continually living as a pariah, despised and hated for no other reason than that they have nothing. In this state of social death, nothingness becomes a continual presence, harshly as an economic material condition, spiritually as an outcast, suffering ever-recurring reincarnations to the lowest states of being, always bearing witness to others of the threat of nothingness in their own lives. In Buddhism and Hinduism, nothingness represents human life against the backdrop of cosmic worlds billions and billions of years old. Proceeding through these eons, human lives reincarnate in a vicious karmic cycle of birth, suffering, and death. For these religious traditions, to experience nothing is to reach a level of self-awareness about self and the world where transience and suffering color all that humans endeavor to accomplish. In the Neoplatonic tradition that is based on the Egyptian Hermetic teachings about the afterlife, the way of the divine life involves living to die. For all her life, the wise person who follows the Hermetic way seeks to die to life and its demands. For this reason, death is not terrifying for her. Death, another aspect of nothingness, will reveal oneness with the unknowable and unfathomable one. And that unknowability of the one is a divine nothingness. It is the abyss that defies human conceptual categories and attempts to make it understandable in normal terms. We must acknowledge and incorporate its mystery into our search for self-awareness. The Neoplatonic tradition teaches that ritual theurgic practice leads to the cleansing of self and preparation for life after death. The theurgic path leads to the continual realization of otherworldly potentialities and the experience of eternal realities. That revelation comes as we realize in our deepest self-awareness of the divine that the transcendent reality is beyond concepts and language. It is the endpoint on the via negativa that rejects every human effort to make the divine into the human self-image. A related idea to nothingness is Soren Kierkegaard's notion of dread and the state of the nothing that it unveils. Dread is a state where I feel everyday self-awareness slipping away from me. Who I am is unmasked as a precariously fictional reality. Imagine yourself in a crowd. You commit a faux pas, and your friends and strangers stare and laugh at you. They scorn and belittle you. In that moment of derision and social catastrophe, your grasp on who you are wavers before your eyes. You desperately want to be someone else. You don't want to be you. Images of you somewhere else and as someone else besiege your mind. Your life flashes before your eyes, like they say happens when you die. In moments like social blunder, the dread of not fitting into the world crashes into who you think you are, and you seem to disintegrate into nothing. Entire scenarios of your life existing in a different body, in a different person, assail the mind's eye. Wishing to be someone else becomes a literal imperative, not just a daydream. Not only an imperative, but for a split second a possibility. In these times of dread, you experience how labile and unreal the self is that you believe with all your heart and soul you are. What a few minutes ago seemed a world solid and joyful suddenly shimmers before your eyes like the illusion of an oasis in the desert, and the terrifying spectacle of non-existence manifests before you. This is not an illusion. What you are realizing is the impermanence and malleability of your ego and social persona. The fact that you experience how the self is so shaken by something as mundane as social embarrassment shows how transient life is. What you believed was unassailable, the concrete you as you really truly are, suddenly wavers and comes crashing down into nothingness. At these times of dread, I see choices that I never expected to make. In fact, in this blink of an eye, I realize that I actually have a choice, that I can choose who or what I am. This awareness may not have been there before. Since society has assigned me a role and a mission, seeing that I can actually choose those realities for myself is a revolution. A world of possibility opens before me. I can continue with what I believe I am, or I can change, perhaps for the better, perhaps not. I can choose to acknowledge the fear and anxiety and continue as normal, or I can choose a self that catapults me into an entirely different person, which I never suspected I could be. In that embarrassing social moment where everyone is laughing at me, I can slink away in defeat or make light of it, or even join in and laugh at myself. Each time we choose who we are like this, authentically faced with all of our life's possibilities, Kierkegaard says we face the nothing. This nothing is where all the possibilities that our lives present to us rise up and offer themselves to be appropriated and enacted. Striving to become something from nothing, I must choose. In terms of spiritual crisis, the anxiety manifests as concern about whether I am living an authentic life. Am I open to the possibility of growth? Can I choose who I am and not let social or peer pressure determine who or what I am? What Kierkegaard's notion of the nothing does is to open up a new way to understand nothingness. Instead of a negative state of loss and emptiness, here nothingness as the nothing of dread serves as a center of growth and power. By finding a way to induce this immense potential, we open ourselves to manifesting great spiritual and occult power. I choose a self in such a way as to become someone filled with infinite, even eternal possibilities. Constructing an eternal self occurs in the nothingness of the present. It is within this nothing that possibilities emerge which guide us on to overcoming the world of shadows. In each of us, faced with the nothingness of anonymity in modern culture, besieged by the fantasies of technology, there rises the desire for the other. This other is what we are not. It is a trace of possibilities pregnant with infinity. By embracing nothingness to ascend to the infinite, we begin to find the source of a true reality beyond time and transience. So, to answer the question that I asked above, about how a self-induced sense of nothingness could result in an expansion of consciousness, that happens because when we sincerely face our loss and despair, we come close to the eternal as infinite possibility. When we face the nothing of becoming a true self, when we manifest it in our magic and in our lives, we reach into the infinite to grasp a bit of it in building a self for eternity. The travails and tribulations of the great wise man Job, completely and wholly committed to God, teach us about nothingness. As God tests Job and the wandering spirit Satan tortures him, Job withstands the trial. He rebukes his so-called friends when they assert he deserves the torture because he has sinned. But that is not so, and God reveals the true reality from a tornado of revelation. Job is righteous, and he is rewarded with the vision of infinite transcendence that guides even the most insignificant being in creation. The vision of how the Transcendent cares for even the smallest being expands Job's consciousness beyond his pain and suffering and his limited social self. The state of nothingness that the suffering and torture reduce Job to prepare him for the vision of wonder and awesome revelation that he receives from God. Being an outcast, despised and hated by even his trusted friends, unjustly accused of committing crimes for which his pain was retribution, Job undergoes a great test, which plunges him into nothingness on the social and spiritual levels. And in that vision of power and grace, Job gains the wisdom to undertake his life anew. The wretched nothingness to which he is reduced purifies and redeems him to be worthy of seeing God in all the glory and wonder which that vision would convey. In the words of Psalms, Job had the veil that hides God's wonders torn away, and the marvels appeared before his eyes. Take the veil from my eyes, the Psalms say, that I may see the marvels that spring from thy law. So how do we induce a state of nothingness? Must we put on sackcloth and sit on a pile of ashes and pour them over our head? Moshe Idel gives us several examples of how the Kabbalists and devout Hasids induce nothingness. Sleeping in graveyards, practicing deep weeping are some techniques they use. Practices where you humble yourself and make yourself into nothing will prepare you for the ordeal of ascending to the ultimate reality and descending to help others in their search for the real. In their magical, mystical practice, the Kabbalists and Hasidim sincerely inculcate and manifest the spirit of the ostracized and dispossessed to produce an altered state of consciousness to initiate their experience of God's power in their lives. Beyond Kabbalism and Hasidism, throughout the ages, hieratic priests and magi have prepared themselves to solicit and receive the gifts of the gods in themselves and their acts. To empty the magus of worldly cares, many rites in the Greek magical papyri require a period of abstinence and fasting. In the days of the Egyptian priests, abstinence and fasting lasted weeks, if not months, for some rites. In Native American festivals and praxis, participants abstain from sex for a month and often eat only specified foods. When adolescent Native males embark on their vision quest, they are left in the desert in a place from which they don't know the way back, and they fast for days until they receive the great vision that will define their days unto death. After their vision, the young men are known to sacrifice a piece of their flesh in gratitude. Hardships like these induce a state of nothingness, a humbling, often terrifying state of being, as close to nothingness as one can get without dying. As the Kabbalists and others know, once you prepare yourself in this way, the expansion of consciousness comes of itself, opening up pathways of awareness and power otherwise unavailable to the everyday mind. The Gnostics attempted to induce nothingness transgressively, for example, having sex in graveyards, breaking taboos and religious laws. According to Eliade, Hindu and Buddhist tantrics performed similar transgressive acts. Dostoevsky's novels dramatized this type of transgressive activity, where the great sinner becomes the great saint. This is the interplay of good and evil in Gnostic acts of redemption. As I mentioned in the last episode, I have experienced these states as my occult history was transgressive and chaotic. Patching together thoughts, words, and actions from diverse sources, occult, spiritual, ethnographic, and literary, I turned my daily life into a day-by-day ritual. I hesitate to call it satanic, though it had elements of evil like that. In the end, I was graced with the visions that taught me much about my true self and started me on the path that lands me here. Can we equate redemption here with the promise of revelation by the occult sciences? I think so. Neoplatonists believed in salvation. It came by way of Gnostic visions and theurgic practice. The Chaldean oracles celebrate Hecate as a savior. By practicing the occult daily, I believe I am preparing myself for incarnations in other lives where I can continue to grow spiritually and theurgically. Humans are temporal beings. We live our life with histories, everyday concerns, and future possibilities. One can't live in the past. It's not about reclaiming a dead past. Let the dead bury the dead, as the prophet Jesus says, but the building of an eternal future. Choose your past, not as the past, but as a preparation for the future. Gear your magical praxis to opening the doors of infinity, engaging with the powers that lead you on to greater and greater insight into fate, destiny, and the path to controlling your life in the worlds to come. That's my message for this day. Join me next time on Paradiso Zoneworks. May the peace of the great God-nourishing silence be with you, and the blessings of Hecate be upon you.